Hi, friends. I have another book from when I was a kid that I love, and it's called Harvey's Hideout. This book reminds me of growing up with my brother. One thing I wanted to let you know, though, is that when I read this book today, I just ordered it today. There were some things in the book that I didn't like. In books that were written a long time ago, sometimes they are not as sensitive to the feelings of other people and as we would hope that they would be. And as a little girl a long time ago, I didn't remember that. So as I read this, I'm going to change some of the words around to be I think kinder and more ethical for today. Okay. So let's get started. I realize why this book reminds me so much of my brother, and it says, for big sisters and little brothers in dens, burrows, and houses everywhere. So. Hopefully I can click this. There we go. All right. It was a quiet summer afternoon, and Harvey Muskrat was building a raft in the backyard. He was hammering hard when his big sister Mildred stuck her head out the window. Harvey, you stop that hammering, said Mildred. I can't, said Harvey. I'm building a raft. Build it someplace else, said Mildred. I'm writing a poem. I can't, said Harvey. This is where the hammer and nails and all my planks and logs are. Why don't you go somewhere else to write your poem? It's my house as much as it is yours, said Mildred. And it's my backyard as much as it is yours, said Harvey. You are being selfish and inconsiderate, said Mildred, and I'm telling. Go ahead and tell, said Harvey. And he went on hammering until his mother came out onto the back porch. Harvey, said Mother, that is a terrible racket to make so close to the house. You really ought to do your hammering somewhere else. So ha, 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 said Mildred, and she stuck out her tongue at Harvey. Harvey stuck his tongue back at Mildred. Then he piled his tools on his planks and logs and swam with them to the other side of the pond to finish his hammering. When the raft was finished, Harvey pulled it across the pond and went fishing on the raft where Mildred could see him from her window. When Mildred saw Harvey, she called, "Can I have a ride on the raft?" No, said Harvey, because this is not the house, and it's not the backyard, and no part of it is yours. It is my raft and nobody else's, so ha, ha, ha. That's what I would expect from a selfish, inconsiderate, stupid, no good little brother like you, said Mildred. That's because you are a mean and rotten big sister, said Harvey, as Mother came back out onto the porch again. You will both have to stop that right now, said Mother, and your father is going to hear about it when he comes home. When Father came rowing home in his boat and opened the front door, he heard about it. Mildred, said Father, it is true that Harvey is selfish and inconsiderate, but he is not stupid and no good. And you are not allowed to call him that. Well, what about what he called me? Father said to Harvey, she is not mean and rotten, and after supper, both of you will have sentences to write. So after supper, Harvey had to write, I will not call Mildred mean and rotten 500 times. Mildred had to write, I will not call Harvey stupid and no good 500 times. Well, said Mildred to Harvey when they had finished their sentences and were standing in the hallway outside their rooms, you see how much trouble we got into? And that's what happens with selfish, inconsiderate, stupid, no good little brothers. Only when they have mean and rotten big sisters, said Harvey. Both of them spoke very quietly so that Mother and Father would not hear them. All right, said Mildred, you will be sorry because I know something you don't know. What? Said Harvey. There's a big party that I'm going to tomorrow, said Mildred, and little brothers are not invited. I don't care, said Harvey, because I know something you don't know. What? Said Mildred. There's a secret club that I belong to that meets in a secret place, said Harvey, and big sisters are not allowed to be members. Well, I don't care, said Mildred, because anything that you are a member of, I would not want to belong to. And any party that you go to, said Harvey, I would not want to be invited to. Then Mildred and Harvey stuck their tongues out at each other, slammed the doors of their rooms quietly, and went to bed. The next day, Mildred tried on several party dresses till she decided which one to wear. Then she folded up the dress very small and wrapped it in a plastic sandwich wrap to keep it dry, and swam off across the pond with the party dress in her mouth. Harvey watched her come out on the far bank and go into the woods. He waited until Mildred was out of sight, and then he pulled his raft across the pond, and he went into the woods too. That evening, after supper, Mildred said to Harvey, "That was a wonderful party this afternoon. We had a really good meeting at the secret club," said Harvey. "There were all kinds of refreshments," said Mildred. "Cake and soda and ice cream." "We had a cookout," said Harvey, "with all kinds of good things. We had hot dogs and baked beans and coleslaw and potato chips and root beer and toasted marshmallows afterwards. It was a lot of fun." "Who was at the secret club meeting?" said Mildred. "Different kids," said Harvey. "No one you know." "Who was at the party?" "Nobody you know," said Mildred. They were all very nice and polite and considerate, and there were no little brothers at all. And there will be another party tomorrow. "There is another secret club meeting tomorrow too," said Harvey, "and we will have a lot of fun again with no big sisters there." The next day, The next day, Mildred came out of the house with a bundle that she had made by tying some things up in her yellow slicker, which is a rain jacket. When she was ready to swim across the pond with it, she found Harvey waiting at the dock with his raft. On the raft was a bundle that Harvey had made by wrapping up some things in his poncho. "You can have a ride across the pond with me if you want," said Harvey. "I'm going that way anyhow." "All right," said Mildred, "but no following me to the party and no looking at what is in my bundle." "All right," said Harvey, "and no looking at my stuff and no following me." Harvey pulled the raft across to the other side of the pond, and Mildred started off the path through the woods. Harvey waited until she was just out of sight, and then he followed her. He was coming around a bend in the path, and when Mildred jumped out from behind a bush, "I told you no following," she said. "I'm not following," said Harvey. "I was just looking for something I lost around here yesterday, but I can look for it later when you're gone." Mildred went off down the path again, and Harvey turned around and slowly went the other way. He went back to the raft and picked up his poncho bundle, and then he went into the woods and followed a trail to a den he had dug in the ground near the banks of the pond. There was a tunnel to the underground den, and the opening of the tunnel was covered up with brush so that nobody could find it. In the floor of the den was a hole lined with stones for building a fire in it, and in the ceiling was a hole for letting the smoke out. On one of the walls was a calendar from the milkman with a picture of a muskrat baby on it, and on the other wall was a drawing of a Native American that Harvey had made. Out of the poncho, Harvey took an egg and 2 strips of bacon, a small frying pan that his mother didn't use anymore, an empty bottle of milk, and a stack of secondhand comic books he had traded for at school. Harvey piled the comic books in a corner of the den. Then he took the milk bottle down to the pond, filled it with water, and put some wildflowers in it. Harvey stood the milk bottle of flowers on the floor of the den in the place where it looked best, under the calendar. Then he fried the egg and bacon and had his lunch. Then he dug a getaway tunnel down to the pond so that the secret club would have a secret exit. And then he sat down inside and read his old comic books, because there was nobody for him to talk to and nobody for him to play with. His best friend, Howard Woodchuck, was at camp, and his next best friends, the Chipmunk children, had gone away with their parents for their summer. The Beaver children were all too big to be his friends, and they made fun of him because he was not very good at cutting down trees. The Opossum children always laughed at him because he could not swing from a branch by his tail, and the Rabbit children were all too fast for him to run around with. So there was nobody in the secret club but Harvey, and that is why there was nobody in the secret clubhouse but Harvey. Harvey thought about Mildred and the good time she was having at her party. She was probably having cake and ice cream, and the girls would be wearing pretty dresses, and they would be playing games. Harvey wished that little brothers were allowed to go to the party, but he decided he would never tell that to Mildred, and he would never tell her that he was the only member of the secret club. Harvey thought about it for a long time, and after a while, he began to cry a little, and he did not want to read his comic books anymore. So he decided to do some more digging in the den to make it a better shape and a little bit bigger. Harvey took down the calendar and the Native American picture, and he moved the milk bottle of flowers, and he began to dig. Harvey dug and carried out dirt until he was tired, and then he sat down to rest. While he was resting, he thought he heard something under the ground close by. Harvey leaned against the wall where he had been digging so that he could listen better. When he leaned against the wall, part of it crumbled away, and there was a little hole that Harvey could hear a voice coming out of. The voice said, "Have another cup of tea, Lucinda. Have some cake." Harvey knew who Lucinda was, and he knew whose voice that was. He put his eye to the hole, and he saw that on the other side of the hole was another underground den right next to his. And inside that den was his big sister Mildred and her old doll Lucinda, who had one leg and her tail missing. They were both wearing party dresses, and they were having a tea party. Mildred had spread a cloth on the ground, and she had brought her tea set. She had real vanilla wafers for cake, but she only had pretend tea, and she had no pictures on the wall, and no flowers, and no comic books. When Mildred looked up and saw Harvey, she was very angry. "That is sneaking," she said, "and that is spying, and it is nasty, and when we get home, I'm telling." "I wasn't sneaking and spying," said Harvey. "I didn't know that you had a secret place next to mine. I thought you really went to parties. That's just plain stupid of you to think that, said Mildred. When you know that my best friend Lavina Otter is away for the summer, and so is my other friend Rachel Squirrel, and the beaver kids are all too big for either of us to play with, and the opossums swing by their tails, and the rabbits are too fast to run around with. So I would like to know just who you think there is for me to have a party with, Mr. Nasty Little Brother. Then Harvey began to cry, and he rubbed his eye with his paw and got dirt in his eye and cried harder. Then he threw some dirt at Mildred and made her party dress dirty, and she began to cry. You are so mean, said Harvey, and I wasn't sneaking and spying. And I was going to give you half of my comic books and a calendar for your wall if you wanted. And I have a cooking hole, and I thought next time we could have a real cookout party, but you are too mean. Mildred stopped crying. How come? She said to Harvey. How come what? Said Harvey. How come you were going to give me comic books and a calendar, and you wanted to have a cookout and all that, said Mildred. Because I'm lonesome, said Harvey, and there's nobody but you to play with, and I was going to be nice. Would you make fun of my poems and my tea parties, said Mildred? Would you laugh when I talked to Lucinda? No, said Harvey, I wouldn't. Would you say mean things about the pictures I draw? And would you tell me that I do everything wrong when I cook? No, said Mildred, I wouldn't. Would you like to have a cup of tea with me and Lucinda? All right, said Harvey. If we make this hole bigger, it can be a doorway between your place and my place. And we can visit back and forth, said Mildred. So Harvey and Mildred made the hole into a doorway, and they ate vanilla wafers and drank pretend tea with Lucinda. And the next time they came there, the secret club had 2 members, and Lucinda had 2 friends to talk to at the tea party next door. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story, Harvey's Hideout, by Russell Hoban, and the pictures by Lillian Hoban.